asked them to meet with their teams to determine how they can improve the situation.
Tonight, Canada in the hot seat again over equal access to health services for First Nations children.
You better get all your money up front now, because you can't trust.
Manitoba Metis say the assault continues from the provincial Pallister Government.
New school, new beginning.
And how Nunavut's newest school has made an impact on attendance. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward.
And I'm Melissa Ridgen. Emergency meetings about Nunavut's suicide crisis continued in Quebec today.
The rates of suicide in the region are about 14 times the national average. And delegates are talking about how to improve the situation. Here's Tom Fenario in Kuujjuaq.
Well, yesterday's meetings put more of an emphasis on daily or individual efforts towards suicide prevention. Today's took more of a big picture approach. Alicia Arugatuk is the chairperson of Nunavut's Regional Suicide Prevention Committee. She began the day with a presentation about what's being done and what needs to improve.
I think the lack of communication between the committee itself to decision makers and also to the community with what resources we have, because we have resources like we presented. I think there's a gap between what is in place and how that information is being projected in the communities.
Sarah Lisa Hasujulik works for NIIA, the Substance Abuse Prevention Program for Nunavik. She says that she can't even count how many people she has lost to suicide.
Few of my family members, friends, cousins, and people that I've known. There's a lot of my teammates when I was in high school. It was very tough to deal with.
Hasujulik says that at these meetings, the communication barriers between organizations are starting to break down. For example, she's hoping to start battling addiction using a cultural approach.
Let's say, for example, because they work for a hunting and trapping association, and for me in addictions, so we can put those together and come up with some kind of a program, maybe an outing, maybe an activity, like something. So partnering up is coming together.
Since 2014, the suicide rate has risen sharply in Nunavik, while it has declined in the 3 other Inuit regions in Canada. Despite this fact, Arugatuk expresses optimism, pointing towards a sexual abuse intervention program that is beginning before the end of the year.
I have a child, and the population in Nunavik is so young. I think it's really, really time to invest in these younger generations, and you know, I'm part of the younger generation. We have no choice.
Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Kuujjuaq, Quebec.
For the second day in a row, the federal government is back at the Human Rights Tribunal in Ottawa. Today, the focus was on the implementation of Jordan's Principle. Dr. Valerie Gideon is the Senior Assistant Deputy Minister of the First Nations and Inuit Health Branch at Indigenous Services. She reported on the progress of Jordan's Principle, an initiative to ensure First Nations kids have the same access to services and supports when needed. Gideon was questioned about a recent client survey that gave a low performance review when it comes to payment delays.
So I did share it with them immediately and indicated my degree of concern. I've asked them to meet with their teams to determine how they can improve the situation if they need new staff. I've also talked to the Chief Finance Officer and the Accounting Hub. They've agreed to simplify the forms that are being used, even as of this morning, in terms of that commitment. I would say all of our executives have in their performance agreements, all of them this year, very explicit obligations and responsibilities on the implementation of Jordan's Principle.
The tribunal hearings wrap up today with more dates scheduled for the new year. The deadline to either opt out or accept the 60 Scoop settlement is today. The settlement agreement is for loss of culture only and does not include any forms of abuse. Accepting the agreement would waive the right to sue Canada for anything related to the 60 Scoop in the future. It's estimated that 22,000 First Nations and Inuit children were removed from their homes in the 1960s to the 1990s and raised by non-Indigenous families.
A First Nations man's hopes for being on Timmins City Council has been quashed. A few days ago, we told you about Corey Robbins, who lost his bid by 2 votes. Well, that 2-point loss was confirmed by a recount, which took place Tuesday. Awesome. Robbins, who is Cree, threw his hat into the race after 2 Indigenous people died in 2 separate incidents with the Timmins police. In another award of that city, Kristen Murphy of the Chapleau Cree First Nation won a city council seat.
Last night, we brought you a story about Rachel Snow from the Stoney Nakoda First Nation in Alberta. She is being sued for $1 million by the Chiniki Band after talking on social media about what she sees as a lack of transparency from leadership. This happened after residents rejected a referendum that would have commercialized nearly 3,000 hectares of land. Snow created a Facebook group encouraging people to vote no. She says members weren't informed enough about the land designation. The Chiniki Band wouldn't do an on-camera interview about the claim, but a spokesperson did say by phone that they held several meetings to provide the community with enough information. Heather Carnahan also said the nation relies heavily on gas royalties, which have decreased dramatically in the past 10 years.
If the community wants to continue to have those things provided from the nation's own funds, we have to look at diversifying and finding other ways to bring in revenues. The other part is looking at other ways to bring in jobs so that people can be working on the reserve.
It's now been 4 months since a camp was set up near the Canada-U.S. border. The goal was to stop Enbridge's Line 3 pipeline replacement, which is nearing completion. But with winter fast approaching, the lone organizer of the camp says she's not leaving. Ashley Branson has the story.
This will be one of the door flaps. This big heavy carpet. We'll put that on the door after, one of them. That'll keep some of the wind out. That's really heavy duty.
Geraldine McManus, a Dakota Indian, is the organizer of the Spirit of the Buffalo Camp. She set up camp near the U.S. border to stop construction of the Canadian and U.S. pipelines. And with the help of some supporters, she's preparing her camp for the cold winter months.
I will stay here as long as I need to stay here. Ancestors brought me here, and ancestors will send me home, I'm sure, somehow, one way or the other, but I'm not going anywhere.
The Spirit of the Buffalo Camp is demanding Enbridge to stop building the pipeline. And even though some of the Indian Act First Nations have signed on, Enbridge does not have informed consent of all Indigenous peoples along the route. McManus says the government needs to stop dealing with corporations destroying the water and the earth.
Traditionally, this is Dakota territory. As an Indian, I am saying that this is important for us to take back our territories, our lands, and let the world know.
Enbridge is in the midst of replacing an existing pipeline from Hardisty, Alberta to Superior, Wisconsin. Now all that's left to do is link the remaining Canadian pipeline replacement to the U.S. But there's no sign of the camp leaving anytime soon.
There comes a time when we have to stand up and say enough is enough, and this is one of those stands right here.
McManus says the corporation tried to scare her into leaving.
Yeah, Quad just about ran me over the other day. I got in front of it to tell it to stop because I'm tired of them driving through the camp.
But Enbridge says none of their people were on or near the campsite. In an email statement, a spokesperson said, Enbridge always strives to build trust and demonstrate respect for human dignity, including respect for cultures, customs, and values of individuals and groups. Enbridge insists the replacement line will be in service in the second half of 2019. But with the camp blocking the route, it's unclear how they plan to make that happen. Ashley Branson, APTN National News, near Gretna.
The Manitoba Metis Federation is calling out the provincial government after a landmark agreement was terminated this week. The agreement between the MMF, the province, and Manitoba Hydro would see the Metis organization receive millions for support of hydro projects. This is the second agreement to be cancelled by the government. Brittany Hobson brings us more.
Under attack for sure, without question, by this Premier.
The Manitoba Métis Federation isn't mincing words when it comes to its already strained relationship with the provincial government. This week, the province cancelled a 20-year agreement, which would see the MMF receive $20 million for its support of hydro projects.
This money served thousands of people. We had programs right across the province. We helped the youth centers, we helped youth culture programs, we helped our senior citizens with wood and so forth.
The Turning the Page agreement was signed by the MMF, the previous NDP government, and Manitoba Hydro in 2014. To date, the MMF has received $5 million. President David Chartrand says the province's decision to pull out opens the doors for concerns with other contracts.
People, that's a dangerous place to be. For anybody, it's a dangerous place to be. If the next government can come cancel your total agreement, then there's no use having long-term agreements. You better get all your money up front now, because you can't trust.
In the agreement is a termination clause. It reads, any of the parties may terminate this agreement by providing not less than 30 days written notice to other parties. Chartrand says the clause was put into place for specific reasons.
It was actually for under, in our view, the extraordinary circumstances, as say Hydro went bankrupt or something of that nature, but it was not meant for somebody to underhandedly come halfway and say, I'm not going to finish off this deal.
The province says the agreement would restrict their duty to consult with all Métis on projects.
At some future point, Métis children will not have the right to participate in protesting a hydro project going through their lands because we bought that right from David Chartrand and the Métis Federation.
Earlier this year, the province cancelled a $67 million agreement between the MMF, Manitoba Hydro, and the provincial government. The deal was for the Federation's support of the construction of the Manitoba-Minnesota transmission line project. The MMF says they plan on taking the province to court over these two agreements. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A new school for Cape Dorset students.
That story is coming up after the break, but first, here's tomorrow's weather forecast.
Starting on the east coast, 13 and showers for Halifax, 7 under the sun in Fredericton. Sunny and +1 in Nain, 0 with a rain-snow mix in Kuujjuaq. 9 for Montreal, 7 in Quebec City, rain and +2 in Saguenay. 8 above for London, Toronto, Peterborough, and North Bay. 6 for Sault Ste. Marie. 5 under the sun in Thunder Bay, snow and +2 in Sioux Lookout. -3 in snow in Puckatawagan, 0 in God's Lake. 4 above with a rain-snow mix in Winnipeg, 2 and snow for Dauphin. In Saskatchewan, 4 and rain for Regina and Saskatoon, 2 with snow in North Battleford, -5 in Uranium City and Stony Rapids. Welcome back. The Quebec Ombudsman looked into Nunavut's education system after many public complaints. A report was released last week that included 14 recommendations. Danielle Rochette has more.
Half of the Inuit population in Nunavut are under 25 years old, and nearly 80% of students drop out before finishing high school, which is 4 times higher than the provincial average. In his report, Quebec Ombudsman Claude Dussault points out that the Quebec Education Ministry is not giving the Inuit School Board the tools to succeed.
We do understand that it's important to respect the value and the culture of the Inuit people, but that doesn't mean that we cannot support them. So I would say that our main finding was a clear message to the Department of Education telling them, please support the Kativik School Board.
Robert Watt, president of the Kativik School Board, was pleasantly surprised by the report.
They came up with the exact issues that we've been dealing with for years. So I'm just very glad because we now have a foundation to start working with. We have re-established our relationship with the Quebec government.
The school curriculum, the students and teacher absenteeism, the lack of services for students with difficulties and disabilities, several education issues connected to entering workforce were all part of the Ombudsman recommendation.
We think that the solution on the long term would be to have as many as possible teachers from Nunavut. I think they better understand the culture, they better understand the needs of the kid up there. So we think it's very important on the long term to develop a maximum of teachers from Nunavut.
21 years old Lucy Alihu is from Akulivik, Nunavut. She moved to Montreal to finish high school and wants to become a teacher. She thinks dropout rates are directly connected to a student's home life.
Their parents are alcoholics and their kids are like very disappointed life, having a disappointed life and having a hard life with their life because of their parents. And their parents are drinking alcohol, spending money, and not caring of their kids. So that's why the kids mostly drop out of school.
Dussault's report also takes into account the family realities students are faced with.
We did formulate a recommendation about to have a better connection between health and social services and the education.
But now that it's on paper, the Quebec's ombudsman promised to get the work done, no matter how long it takes.
We're going to keep track of those recommendations year after year after year after year until they are fully implemented. We're talking very long term here. I mean, we can't solve everything tomorrow, but I mean, step by step, we could improve the situation and have a much better situation in the long term.
The Quebec Minister of Education was not available for an interview, but sent this in a statement to APTN. The department is sensitive to the Inuit reality and will be actively involved with the Kativik School Board and related partners to find ways to implement the report's recommendations. The Quebec Ombudsman is expecting an action plan from the new Quebec Minister of Education and Higher Education no later than February 2019. Daniel Rochette, APTN National News, Montreal.
We'd like to hear what you have to say. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/APTN News. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest Indigenous news.
In 2015, a school in Cape Dorset, Nunavut, burned to the ground as a result of arson. This year, a new school finally opened for Dorset's older students, and our Kent Driscoll found out this new building solves a lot of Nunavut's running education problems.
About the only thing that isn't new at the Peter Pitzelak School in Cape Dorset is that shiny sign outside. The rest of this $34 million school is brand new. After the original Peter Pitzelak School burned down in 2015 due to arson, students didn't have an open atrium like this one. They didn't have a music room like this. They spent a year in portable classrooms and another doing split shifts with the elementary school. According to their principal, the new building has brought back some old faces. Nunavut high schools face chronic poor attendance.
We're sitting at around 92% attendance, which is incredible. One of the problems for us is that this facility was built for a student population of 160, and currently we have an enrollment of 210. So we are bursting at the seams in that respect.
And the place looks great. The kids are fun and engaged in learning. This is Nunavut's newest school. What does the principal think worked here that can work elsewhere?
We have a modern home ec room and we have a modern shop. And those appeal to our students very much.
Monica Manning is a grade 11 student here at Peter Pitzelak. She was also a student in the old school and sees a change.
I see they show more respect now to the school and the teachers more than they did in the other school. They listen more, we could see smiles everywhere.
Monica is right about that. I saw smiles everywhere, not just here during class picture day.
New school, new beginning, and we're actually serious about school now.
According to StatsCan, throughout Canada, 85% of Canadians receive their high school diploma. Here in Nunavut, the number is as low as 35%. As recently as 2012, this very school had a 46% attendance rate. That has changed, and that means Nunavut education officials may have to consider what role a modern school can play in helping attendance, because it sure looks like it's working at this one. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Cape Dorset.
It's time for us to take another break.
But first, here's a look at a story we're working on.
Coming up on APTN National News, we'll meet two mothers who share how important it is to support LGBTQ children.
I hugged my son and I, told him I loved him, and no matter what, no matter who said anything about it, I would choose him, be it church, family, friends, anyone.
Their life depends on it. It's the most important thing.
Watch for the full story this week on APTN National News.
Picking back up in northern Alberta, 0 with snow for Fort McMurray. 6 above with rain in Medicine Hat and Lethbridge. 5 for Calgary. On the west coast, 12 with showers for Vancouver and Victoria. 10 with rain for Bella Coola. -4 in Fort Nelson, snow, and -5 for Dease Lake. In the Yukon, sunny and -13 in Beaver Creek and Rock River. -15 under the sun in Old Crow. Sun and -3 for Fort Liard and Trout Lake. -7 for Wrigley. -16 in Tuktoyaktuk. -12 in Inuvik and Sax Harbor. In Nunavut, 0 for Chesterfield with snow. -2 in Arviette and Whale Cove. -16 in Igloolik. -18 for Arctic Bay.
Welcome back. Two of the hosts from APTN's hit show, The Other Side, joined me earlier today on In Focus. We chatted about their work investigating paranormal activity and some of their favorite moments from the last 3 seasons.
I absolutely believe that it's more likely to have a haunted person or an object than it is a haunted space. I think that they're drawn to people specifically. I think that Roger was drawn to Tom. I think that other individuals that we've had experiences with over the years and the seasons are drawn to us as a group. Think of it as if they're wandering through the fog and there are these brightly lit lamps that are attracting them and calling for them. So, I believe that what our caller is saying is accurate. When changes happen in your life, your perspective changes, and sometimes that makes you more open. It makes you seek or look for specific connections, and I believe that it's just that lamp getting brighter. That's why often they are attracted to us.
Or they might recognize your voice in the distance, and they want to attend to that voice. And then they recognize the voice, and they want to make contact with that voice. The caller is correct in saying that if there's sudden death or sudden experience of close to death, you're almost flatlined or half flatlined, your body senses increase.
The Other Side Season 4 premieres tonight right here on APTN. Check your local listings for show times. And In Focus, if you missed it today, it repeats at 11 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. That's all the news we have for you tonight.
You can also
Halloween.
catch that In Focus online, because it was a spectacular one, so if you want to watch it again
Spectacular.
I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for joining us. Have a safe Halloween night.